It's time to shine a light on this issue and work together to create a change. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Zoe Glenns-Brush, and I'm very excited to introduce what I've done for my capstone this semester. I decided I wanted to address a critical issue that affects countless youth, and maybe even some of you in this room: childhood sexual assault. I understand this can be a very hard and sensitive topic, and if anyone feels uncomfortable, please feel free to take a step out of the room. However, I want to emphasize the critical importance of discussing childhood sexual assault and raising awareness about this deeply impactful issue. I believe everyone deserves to feel safe. For a long time, silence has hidden the experiences of survivors, leaving them feeling isolated and ashamed. By openly addressing this issue, we break down stigma and encourage survivors to share their stories, fostering a supportive community. Awareness also empowers us to educate others about boundaries and consent, equipping them with the knowledge they need to protect themselves. Today, I'll be helping you understand what childhood sexual assault is. I will show you some impactful statistics, the impact on survivors, the importance of support as well as reporting, then prevention and advocacy. That will then lead to my explaining my outcome project that I designed throughout the semester and explaining my process. To begin, the definition of childhood sexual assault refers to any sexual activity or contact that is forced upon a child or adolescent by an adult or an older individual. This can include a wide range of abusive behaviors, which I'll get to in a minute. The key defining feature of childhood sexual assault is that the victim is under the age of consent, typically under 18, and lacks the capacity to give informed consent due to their age and developmental stage. So the term physical abuse can encompass physical contact, such as inappropriate touching, penetration, or oral sex. However, there is a range of different sexualized behaviors, so physical contact is not the only type of abuse, which I believe is important to recognize. There is non-physical contact, such as exposing a child to pornography, indecent exposure, or coercing a child into sexualized behavior, even if no physical contact occurs. And sexual exploitation, which may involve a child being coerced or manipulated into performing sexual acts for someone else's benefit, often involving pornography or even prostitution. Childhood sexual assault is more common than people may realize, though underreporting is a significant issue. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, and other child protection agencies, the following statistics are commonly cited. Alarmingly, about 85% of child victims never report their abuse due to fear, shame, or threats by the perpetrator, making these statistics likely underestimates to the true scale of the problem. The majority of childhood sexual abuse perpetrators are known to the victim. In fact, 93% of children who are sexually assaulted know their abuser. This could be a family member, a friend, an acquaintance, or an authority figure. The reason for this is because abusers typically target children they already have access to, allowing them to manipulate and groom the child over time. Strangers, by contrast, have limited opportunities to engage with children in such intimate ways. Additionally, children are often supervised by parents or caregivers, reducing the likelihood of encounters with strangers where abuse could occur. Moreover, abusers are often psychologically motivated to target vulnerable children within familiar environments, where they can exploit existing relationships of trust, making it harder for strangers to carry out such behavior. While abuse by strangers does happen, it is much less common compared to abuse perpetrated by someone the child already knows but also trusts. Children cannot consent to sexual activities, and abusers are the ones responsible for the crime and not the victim. Up here I have an age of consent map. So the age of consent here in Vermont is 16, and across the US it ranges from ages 16 all the way up to 18. Consent is something that must be communicated freely for any sexual activity. Consent can be described through the acronym FRIES, which I have up there. So it is freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. After a traumatic experience such as this, there comes long-lasting physical, emotional, and psychological effects on children, and the trauma can persist well into adulthood if not properly addressed. Now I want to discuss the profound, long-lasting psychological effects that can affect victims of a form of sexual abuse. And I want to emphasize the word can, because even though reports say these are possible psychological effects, that does not mean it'll occur in everyone, and severity also varies based on the level of support received. According to the article titled "Sexual Assault Impacts Teenagers' Mental Health and Education" by Beeston, some of the most common psychological responses include trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Sexual assault in childhood can lead to trauma that severely affects a person's emotional and psychological well-being. Symptoms of PTSD may include intrusive memories, such as flashbacks or nightmares from the assault, or hyperarousals. This can include heightened anxiety, exaggerated startle response, irritability, difficulty concentrating, and also sleep disturbances. There is also avoidance, so survivors may avoid situations, places, or people that remind them of the trauma. This can lead to isolation and emotional numbness. In adulthood, survivors may struggle with these symptoms for years, and some can even develop complex PTSD, which involves more severe and prolonged emotional and psychological difficulties. The next one I want to talk about is anxiety. Survivors of childhood sexual assault often experience heightened levels of anxiety, and this can manifest in several ways. Generalized anxiety, a pervasive sense of worry about everyday activities and situations, social anxiety, which is a fear of judgment or rejection by others, and panic attacks, which are episodes of intense fear or dread accompanied by physical symptoms like a rapid heartbeat, a shortness of breath, or even dizziness. Anxiety is often exacerbated by the survivor's sense of powerlessness during the assault, leading them to feel as if they are always going to be at risk. Depression. Childhood sexual assault is strongly associated with depression, particularly in adulthood. Survivors may experience persistent sadness or hopelessness, loss of interest in their daily activities, low energy and self-worth, and maybe even suicidal ideation. The shame and self-blame often associated with sexual assault contribute to the onset of depression. These feelings are compounded by the societal stigma surrounding childhood sexual assault, which can prevent survivors from seeking help or acknowledging their suffering. So the psychological impact of childhood sexual assault can persist across the lifespan, influencing emotional regulation, coping mechanisms, and overall mental health, especially if early intervention and support was not addressed. After hearing these possible after effects, you may or may not be wondering how to get support and what to do to recover from a traumatic experience such as this. There are many resources for survivors to report their abuse so that they can get the support they need as well as the justice that they deserve. I have put together some things you can do for survivors from an article I researched titled "Psychological After Effects Experienced by Sexually Abused Children," written by Choi and colleagues. Number 1, talking about the importance of the issue. Even though this is a very sad and difficult topic, you guys can start discussing childhood sexual assault to break the silence, reduce stigma, and validate survivors' experiences. Number 2, creating a safe environment for survivors. It's essential to create an open environment where survivors feel comfortable sharing their trauma, which aids in healing. A safe, non-judgmental space is critical for survivors to feel heard and supported. And I wanted to emphasize non-judgmental because teenagers in high school are very judgmental. Key elements include confidentiality, empathy, active listening, and affirmation. These help survivors feel believed and empowered to speak about their experiences. Number 3, role of support networks. Therapy. I'm sure many of you had tried therapy before, and if you haven't, our counselors over in Tinker are a great resource to start. Also, support from family, friends, counselors, and support groups is vital in healing. These networks provide emotional support and practical assistance as survivors process their trauma. These are all important ways to help make sure that your friends and family are safe and can heal from the trauma. Lastly, I want to talk to you guys about reporting these types of cases because it seems that there is not a lot of recognition about this process. So, how and when to report? Survivors can report abuse at any time, even years after the abuse. Reporting can be done to law enforcement, child protective services, or a healthcare professional. Resources for survivors to report their abuse include hotlines, which are direct phone lines for emergencies. So I have the National Sexual Assault Hotline and the National Child Abuse Hotline up there on my slideshow. Counseling services, so professional therapy, including trauma-focused care, can be found through local clinics or online platforms for the healing process. And legal and advocacy support. Survivors can access free legal services and victim advocacy groups to guide them through reporting and legal options. Advocacy agencies provide education through community outreach. There are so many different options for support for survivors, and many people may not even know these exist, which is why advocacy is a huge part in ensuring that everyone stays safe. Creating safe spaces for survivors to talk and offering accessible reporting mechanisms are key to supporting survivors of childhood sexual abuse. Throughout open conversations, legal resources, and professional support, survivors can begin the healing process and seek their justice. Now, I'm very excited to introduce my project aspect of my capstone, as well as my process. For the outcome of my capstone work this semester, I collaborated with Umbrella in St. Johnsbury because I believe what they do is important. If you don't know what Umbrella is, they are a nonprofit organization here on Main Street that is focused on advocating and empowering everyone. They have a website and a phone number you can call if you'd like to look into more information about what they do. They offer 4 different types of services, shown with the acronym SAFE. That stands for Social Change, Advocacy, Family-Based Services, and Economic Empowerment. For my outcome, I spent the semester working with representatives from the Advocacy and Social Change departments to determine how my capstone on childhood sexual abuse could somehow correlate and benefit their organization. After experiencing having Umbrella come visit our 9th grade health classes to discuss topics such as sexual abuse, rape, teen dating violence, and consent, I found those presentations very informational for our students. As a group, we decided that designing flyers regarding the topic of sexual abuse in adolescence, but also one about teen dating violence, would be beneficial for those students so they can gain important information. You may have also seen them all around campus. These are the flyers I created. So the one on the left is a flyer regarding consent and the age of consent in Vermont, and the one on the right is about teen dating violence, and I put some impactful statistics on there. In closing, I want to emphasize that childhood sexual assault is a devastating and deeply traumatic experience that affects not only the survivors, but the communities and society at large. It is essential that we, as a collective, provide a safe and supportive environment where survivors can heal without fear of judgment or retribution. We must listen, believe, and support those who have suffered. Our responsibility is to ensure that children are protected, that perpetrators are held accountable, and that survivors have the access they need to resources they need to rebuild their lives. It is important to break the silence and raise awareness, as I did with my capstone, and continue to fight for justice and healing. It is vital that someday we can build a future where no child has to endure such trauma, and where every survivor can find the strength to reclaim their voice, their power, and their life. Before I close, I want to highlight that April is not only Sexual Assault Awareness Month, but it also correlates with Child Abuse Prevention Month. I will be back in April to discuss more about the importance of April and my personal connection to the topic, which I did not get to today. Thank you. Any questions?
If you had more time, what else would you research?
If I had more time, I would definitely research more into statistics surrounding childhood sexual abuse within different races, because that's something that is interesting to me and I did not get to put in my presentation.
Zoe, for your definition that you had at the beginning of your slides, was that a source that came from like a national advocacy center, or was that directly pulled from like the language from Vermont statutes and law?
I pulled it from, it's in my sources somewhere out of a bunch of my sources, but I pulled it from, I think maybe RAIN, which is a childhood sexual assault like website that has a hotline, but I'll have to look at my sources to remember.
I want to say thank you for addressing what I see as a really important topic and one that's not talked about enough. And I was also wondering if you could speak to how you hope your project could be preventative, could address preventing child sexual abuse as well as helping survivors heal.
Yeah, so my posters, the main goal of that was to raise more awareness, because I feel like it is a scary topic, so it's definitely not talked about. So I feel like my posters definitely would help in prevention just by advocating, so that the more awareness that is raised about it, more people will know about it, and the stigma will be broken down, so it can help more survivors share their stories and prevent it in the future.
Did you just put the posters like in our school? Or are you hoping to put them in other schools and around town?
Yeah, so I put them around our campus, and I also, the representatives at Umbrella, so like Chelsea, who came to our 9th grade health classes, she has them, so she can give them as handouts to students after she goes to give those presentations. And then she also gave, I think, Danville and Linden Institute those access to those flyers as well.
How did you decide what information to put on your posters?
Yeah, so that was really hard, because I wanted to address the issue, but I also didn't want to scare people about the topic. So I decided that statistics were definitely a good option to put, because it shows how impactful the issue is, and just like definitions. But it was really hard to decide what I would implement that would be informational and catch people's attention, but also not scare them.